First of all, welcome to Something Wicked DocuFest. What I would like you to do is each of you tell us who you are, what you did on your film, and what is your film, so everyone knows, generally speaking, what we're talking about.
Sure. Hi, my name's Bonnie Waltch, and I'm the senior producer and writer on Climate Emergency Feedback Loops, which is a series of short films. I made the films with director Susan Gray, and who couldn't be here tonight. So I'm representing the filmmakers.
And my name is Melanie Wallace, and I'm on this project as the impact producer. Bonnie and I are longtime friends and have collaborated on many films. And then when this film came to fruition, basically, they called me one day and said, could you recommend somebody who could help us do PR and marketing? And I said, well, what if I wanted to volunteer? Could I do that? And they said, well, talk to our producer. So it worked out, and Bonnie and I have been working on this for a couple years now, right?
Yeah. Yes. And in all fairness, Susan and I actually did consult with Melanie a few times during the making of the film, because Melanie worked at the PBS science series Nova.
Oh,
and so we went to her for advice a couple times about the project.
So I was well informed about this. And I remember having the conversation with them. They said, well, we're thinking of asking Richard Gere to be the narrator. What do you think? It's like, well, if you can do that, that would be a really good idea. That was one of my bits of information.
Oh, I'm glad you remember that.
Yeah. So I am a science journalist and science filmmaker for more than 30 years, working at Nova and PBS. And, this is my next career, is being a consultant and working on independent projects and bringing all of my experience and contacts to the service of other younger filmmakers.
Nice.
Other filmmakers.
So
she is younger, but very talented and very experienced.
Well, that's good to know, because I'm going to be asking you about some of that experience there.
Absolutely.
Bonnie, how long have you been involved with this project in particular? Because it seemed like it was a series of shorts, but I wasn't 100% sure until just now when you said it.
Yes. So we started working on the short films, I would say, in probably February of 2019. Oh. We started doing all the research. And our producer, we have another producer who came to us and said, he wanted to make this film about climate feedback loops, because he'd been hearing about them and a lot of people didn't know what feedback loops were. And so he wanted to educate the world about climate feedback loops. And he asked Susan and me, what we thought, and we gave it some thought, and we said, well, if your goal is to really reach the whole world, the best way to do it is to make shorts and put them on a website. And that way anyone around the world can access them. And so that's how we started. And we began filming in fall of 2019. Luckily, we got everything shot before COVID hit. So our first shoot was January of 2020. And then we started editing shortly after that and had to go remote and edit remotely and all that because of COVID. But we did end up finishing them, completing them in October of 2020. And then we had a big launch in January of 2021. We had this incredible event where we brought the Dalai Lama and Greta Thunberg together on a virtual panel with a couple of our scientists and showed clips from our films. And we had over 1 million people tune in globally.
Nice.
So we launched the films that way.
Yeah, that was interesting having them having her at the very end of this short film, since there's more of it now. I was not expecting that. Because to be honest with you, I know a little bit about climate change, but the feedback loops is something that I wasn't familiar with. Like, I didn't know there was a term for it. Like, there's that thing where you tend to know that that's something that has to deal with climate change, but until you said feedback loops, it was like, oh, now it's making much more sense. And I think that you're correct in saying that if you did short films, people would understand it better. Because now I understand it a hell of a lot more than I did before watching the film.
Yeah, no, a lot of people know about climate change. They know about global warming, but as you said, they don't necessarily know about these feedback loops that are making it worse. So that's the message we wanted to get out there.
But then one of the things that I suggested was having them on the website is great, but if you want broadcasters to show them globally, it would help to make a 1 hour. And so through some of my contacts, we found a distributor and a company in London who took the 5 shorts and then, removed the repetitive pieces and made a 1 hour, which is called Earth Emergency. And that was broadcast on PBS in December of 2021, right, Bonnie?
In December of 21. And then again, they played again last April of 22.
Right, for Earth Day. Right.
Earth Day, they played it a lot. Yeah.
But it also exists on the PBS website and through their Amazon Prime channel.
Okay.
So you can see the 1 hour Earth Emergency there.
And also you can rent it on iTunes and Amazon Prime.
Right. But the short films are on our website and they're available for free to whoever can find them.
And the nice thing about having the short films is they're really perfect for schools. And we actually have a curriculum. We have a science curriculum for grades 6 through 12 up there for free. So we're really encouraging teachers to use these films and use the curriculum to teach about climate change in their science classes.
Nice. Well, by all means, if you send me the link where we can see all of them, I will make sure they're posted and give some type of little verbiage for like teaching purposes and stuff like that, because this is very important information. And like I said, this is the first time I've ever heard of the term feedback loops. So it was very interesting for me. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from educators about this.
Speaking of feedback loops,
which is interesting because I know a lot of filmmakers who I've talked to have never thought about some of their films going out to that audience, schools and educators and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that you brought that up and that we're talking about that. So
yeah.
So, and we're also working with Rotary International to create what they're calling a global climate feedback loop toolkit, which will have our films plus additional resources. And the idea is to create a website where people can come and find all of this stuff, and it will be easily accessible to them. And we're in the process of creating that and pulling additional resources together. And the idea right now, our short films are available in 27 languages, Bonnie?
Yeah.
In 27 languages. So the idea is that would be increased, and it would help community groups who want to work around climate issues locally, which is interesting.
Nice. So making films, other than getting them done during COVID, what was some of the most challenging aspects of making these?
Well, I have to say that by the time we were ready to start filming, it was October, and a lot of the scientists that we were planning to interview had already come back from their summer field work. And so we had been hoping to film them in the field, as it were, doing their research and their work. But we kind of missed that window. So we ended up using a lot of really gorgeous archival footage. So we got really good interviews with the scientists, and then we found incredible footage. So I feel like it didn't really detract from the films, but a lot of science films, you see like the scientists working in the field or working in the lab, and we didn't get a lot of that. So we kind of relied on other imagery for the film.
But Bonnie, tell them about doing the permafrost story and how powerful that story is with the scientists that you put together.
Well, you do it, because I don't know what you're thinking of.
I can't remember the name of the
Sue
Natali. Yeah, it looks like she's in the field doing research.
Well, we did get stock footage of her in the field, so we got.
But it was put together in a very powerful way. It felt very first person.
Yeah,
and many people respond to her experience of being in the Arctic and finding out that her foot is going to go through the level,
the permafrost.
It went through the permafrost, which had never done before. She's been working in the Arctic for years. That had not happened to her. And her personal experience, as she explains it, is very powerful. And that has resonated a lot with people who watch it. So
the scientists we filmed were really good storytellers. So that's another reason why I feel like the films were strong, because of the stories they told like this. And we did get a little footage of Sue in her lab in the research center she works at. So, between the archival we got of her in the field and we filmed a little of her in the lab, we did more of sort of a typical science documentary scene with her.
So I have to ask this because I haven't asked you about any of your background before you did these films. Is your background in filmmaking, have you been doing these type of films before, science-based, or is this your first one?
No, I've done a lot of science filmmaking throughout my career. I've worked on various PBS science series, science programs. I worked on a TV series with Alan Alda called Scientific American Frontiers.
Okay.
That told little science stories in a magazine format. I've more recently I've done a lot of work for museums. And so for that work, I've done probably a little more history, but I've also done science. Like I did media for this science museum in Nebraska, at the state university. They have a science museum. So I did some films for them that play in their museum. And I've been doing, so for the museum work, I do more sort of natural history, geology, and regular history. But so this was actually the first chance I'd had in a little while to do just a straight science documentary. And it was really fun. I do love doing films like that. I like the challenge of making the science comprehensible to the lay audience.
Interesting. Well, you're the first filmmaker I've talked to who've done these type of films, so it's very interesting to me because I wasn't sure if this was something that the subject matter was something you had a passion for, or if it was something that someone brought to you and you did it based on that. So
yeah, that's a good question. It was actually the latter. Someone brought it to Susan Gray, the director, said, I want to do this film. And then she pulled me onto it because of my background. So, but as I was doing the research, it became a passion because I've always been a believer in climate change. And, but this was the first time I'd really dug into it in a deep dive kind of way. And what I learned made me very passionate about it. So now I'm try to be a climate activist.
And hope that you get the word out for other people as well, I'm sure.
Exactly.
And given my experience at NOVA, I can say that the first climate film I worked on was in 1983, and I went to the to the Senate House to film Al Gore as a senator before he had made his film on climate change.
Yeah.
And if anybody had listened to that film where the scientists were saying, if we don't do this by the end of the century, and that would have been the year 2000, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And guess what?
No one did anything.
No one did anything. So,
well, yes, the oil company did a huge campaign of misinformation.
That's true. That is exactly what they did. Yeah. Yeah. So climate change has been important to NOVA and PBS for all these years as well. Not just me, but yeah.
And with you, Melanie, what was some of the challenges you faced by making this film or helping to make this film?
Well, I actually did not make the film. They brought me on after the film was done. So my challenge was getting everybody to understand a 1 hour is a good idea. Let's make a 1 hour and let's try to sell it globally, which we've done, not to the full extent of the world, but we're getting it out there. It's been seen in Scandinavia, in Italy, in Australia. Right now we're working in a partnership with the Science Museum in Seoul, Korea. And they're going to show three of the short films in a climate change exhibit they're putting together starting in April. So we're really excited about that through contacts that I had developed through NOVA.
Melanie's connected to everyone in the world. So through her, we got it on PBS and we got this distributor in London. And so because of her, the 1 hour is being seen everywhere.
Yeah, we're still trying to get it seen in more places, but we recently had a very interesting contact with someone from South Africa who is very interested in bringing the climate feedback loop understanding and the short films into her world. She's a reverend with the Anglican Church in Cape Town, and she told us it was so heartwarming that she's going to be speaking in Ghana to a gathering and she wants to include feedback loops, and could we help her? Do we have any slides? And she's going to be spreading the word of understanding how the warming is happening through our films. So suddenly we have an opening in Africa, which is something we'd been striving for, but we hadn't quite figured out how. So I'm going to be working, on helping with her with that. So we're looking to get into different communities and then working with the communities. We've done several Zoom webinars, essentially. While we've worked with Climate Reality Project, we've done a few of those locally in Boston. Bonnie was invited to the Citizens Climate Lobby National Convention in the summer in Washington, D.C. And so she was able to show some films and work with scientists and meet people there. And those are people who are striving to speak directly to their lawmakers. And so CCL, which is the name that they're referred to, is meant to train citizens to be more activist. And so our films are helping them, which was very satisfying. And so we're going into lots of different community groups to make the films available for activists.
Very interesting. It's interesting because, like you said, you're taking this short film and kind of splintering it off to other different areas of media to help get the word out. So your film has got like an additional life beyond the original version that you thought it had. Yeah. Like Bonnie, you did a series of short films. Then Melanie took it and made an hour-long film. So now you're doing seminars trying to help get the word out. And I'm sure anyone watching this will realize that certain subject matters lend themselves to multiple different interpretations and multiple different ways of getting the word out to different outlets, which is extremely beneficial, especially if you're trying to recoup some type of profit and or residuals to keep making more and keep doing more with the same project.
Exactly. And one of the things, Bonnie has been invited to be the keynote speaker in Wichita, Kansas at the Kansas Science Teachers Association annual convention. So that's an opportunity to go into the Midwest where climate change is happening and provide our understanding to those teachers, and then they can take them into classrooms. And so that's going to be exciting, I think, going to Wichita.
Yeah.
So
Kevin, to your previous point, we're in the very, very enviable position of having a funder who covered the cost of the films and is continuing to pay us to do outreach. Most filmmakers don't have that opportunity, so it's a little unusual. Most filmmakers have to keep raising the money to do the kind of impact work that we're doing, but we just really are lucky in that we have an individual who's funding our efforts, so we can just keep doing this and getting the word out.
Okay. So so what is the I guess the reason for continuing to send it to film festivals? Since obviously you've got it already distributed, you've already screened it in lots of different other locations, but you're also still doing the film festival route as well.
Yeah. No, we are, because we want to reach as many audiences as possible.
Right.
We know a lot of film festivals draw certain crowds, certain people that are interested in certain topics. Some of the ones we've gotten into are environmental film festivals that draw people who can help spread our message. Some are festivals where they might not necessarily be that interested in the environment, but they learn about our films and they maybe, think about climate change more seriously. So we're just trying to reach as many people as possible.
Nice. I always like that.
We were very fortunate to find out that Disney Plus bought the 1 hour, and it's going to be in Latin America, everywhere, in Spanish. So, and we thought Disney Plus, and it was a person who put together a package of films for Disney Plus, and apparently most of the films were fiction, but they wanted our documentary. And maybe it's because Richard Gere is the narrator, but they're going to replace him with a Spanish-speaking person. But you can say Richard Gere narrated this film, which gives a level of sunshine around the film. So we're so excited. It'll be in Spanish in Latin America. And they'll learn about climate feedback loops. So you just don't know, right? You got to reach out.
No, you just don't know. So Any interesting stories in regards to the process of making the film, Bonnie?
Oh, let's see. Interesting stories. Let's see. Well, we found out that some of the top climate scientists in the world were 90 minutes away from us in Boston. And this little tiny research center called the Woods Hole Research Center on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, that since got renamed the Woodwell Climate Research Center after its founder, George Woodwell. So we ended up, half our scientists that we interviewed were all from this little research center on Cape Cod. And then, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
And they're fantastic, and they're used to communicating, the science with journalists and the world. And then we found the other 6 in various places, including the one from the UK, a couple from Boulder, Colorado, one on the West Coast. So it was kind of a smattering all over the place for the other 6. But that was pretty interesting to discover that there was this Center for Climate Research right in our backyard. So
yeah, we
that
never thought that, huh? Interesting. But I guess it made it a little easier.
yeah, a little easier, a little more cost efficient. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to film everything then? Because this was all before COVID started.
Yes.
When you did all your editing. So
yeah, so we did the 6 interviews at this little research center over the course of just 2 days. So we did half of them in 2 days. And then the rest we did kind of here and there, like a couple of people, the guy from the UK and one of the guys from Boulder actually came to Boston for various conferences in December and January. So we got to film them in Boston. And then I did make a trip to the West Coast to film our tree expert, Beverly Law. And then I did make another trip to Colorado to film another of our scientists who is at National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder. So that happened between, I'd say, December and January. We did the other 6. So we did it really October through January, and then we were done with all the film. Yeah.
But Bonnie, talk a little bit about the animation that you created and how important that was.
Yeah. Yeah. So the rest of the time we had a wonderful associate producer who found us all the great archival footage, including like a guy in Russia who had drone footage of the melting permafrost. And, we just found really great footage. And then we had a graphics person do all the feedback loops graphics. So we wanted to keep coming back to this idea of a loop, like a vicious circle. This causes this, causes this, causes this, around and around in a circle. And so we came up with this idea to make this feedback loop graphic where we started with fossil fuel emissions. And then depending on the story, we had a little arrow going to like, more heat in the atmosphere melting the Arctic sea ice, which then, the arrow goes to more open ocean, which absorbs more sunlight, which melts more sea ice. So we created these little loops with arrows, and they were really effective because we kept using them over and over again with each feedback loop story. And between the 5 films, I think there are about 16 different feedback loops that we talk about. So that was a cool graphic, and it really reinforced this idea of a vicious cycle. And then the other graphic we did is we made little like bubbles of carbon dioxide and methane, coming out of the melting permafrost and being released by the trees, and carbon being released. And so that also reinforced this idea that greenhouse gases are being released as things, as the permafrost melts and as, things get warmer and hotter and trees die. And so we really relied a lot on these graphics to get our message across.
Mm-hmm. How long was that process? Was that like a long process in your post-production, or was it a short process? Or
yeah, it was pretty long. I guess we started post around January, and we didn't finish till the following October. So yeah, it was pretty long post period. I mean, it wasn't full time. It was a little off and on over those months, but it was a lot of getting things right, tweaking the graphics and making sure we had the right footage and archiving.
And our archival footage. I've never asked this question before to someone else. Was the cost for the archival footage a lot, or were you using stuff that people gave you, or gave you free usage for, or how was?
It was kind of a mix.
Okay.
I think our archival budget was about 30,000 total. So I think that's probably about what it is for 1 hour. I mean, it was more probably than if you'd gone and shoot, but then again, it's cheaper actually to use archival than to take a film crew out to the field, especially like the Arctic, so I think it's cheaper in the long run to use archival.
So Bonnie, could you just say a little bit more about, expand on your comment where you said getting it right?
Yeah.
Because as a science producer, that's fundamental, and I don't know that everybody understands what that means.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So when we had our rough cuts in around March, I guess 3 months into the editing process, we had rough cuts, March, April, maybe. We felt it was really important to show them to a lot of different people to make sure they were working, because we were getting across really complicated scientific concepts. And so we had a lot of, what do you call them? Test screenings? What do you call them? Sorry?
Test screenings. Screenings.
Yeah, feedback screenings to get people's feedback on how they were working. And we ended up getting a really, really important information from those. We showed it to like science teachers, just regular people, other filmmakers, a couple young people, like college students, just a whole range of potential audience members. And we got really great feedback, and we actually made a lot of changes based on that feedback, because we realized that some things we thought we were explaining well, we weren't explaining as well as we could have, or maybe this should have come first. So we, flipped a couple things. We just made sure we were really addressing everyone's concerns that we heard about. And I think we did a pretty good job of like addressing mostly everything that people told us that, was a little hard to understand or wasn't quite working. And it's almost like going back to the drawing board. I mean, we didn't start from scratch, but we really did redo some things, did them differently.
Okay.
And I think it made the films much better. Yeah.
It's like one of the principles is you say something and then somebody might say, well, how do you know that? Right. And then you have to think about, well, how much of that detail am I going to share? Because there's levels of understanding. And I actually think this film did an almost perfect job of being able to explain enough so that people understand how it is that a scientist is going to say that, without, anyway.
And you get so close to the topic that it's hard to see clearly. That's why these kind of test screenings are so important, because Susan and I were in it for so long that we kind of knew everything. And so you think you're conveying things that but it's great to get that feedback from someone who's seeing it for the very first time. Is like, what? Wait, I didn't quite get that. So it's really useful to do that.
Interesting. Yeah. This is the first time I've ever actually talked about test screenings with a film. So that's interesting that you mentioned this. I'm sure other people will watch this and say test screenings can actually be beneficial to my
well, if you're making a science film, it is for sure.
But a lot of filmmakers do that just to make sure the structure of their film is working and the message is getting across. So I think a lot of people do that even not working on a science film, just to get a reality check, make sure what they're hoping to get across is coming across.
Yeah. Well, I know that's why I send my films to film festivals. I like to watch them with an audience and make sure I'm getting the right reactions.
Exactly.
The right reactions in the right spots.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What kind of films do you make?
I made a little bit of everything. Actually, I haven't done a documentary in years until now. So I'm in the process of editing it. But I'll get it done eventually this year.
Okay.
But me and my partner's original concepts, we're all doing genre films. Our first film festival is a genre film festival: fantasy, sci-fi, animation, experimental, all that type of stuff. But because we have such a love of nonfiction film, we decided to do the splintered film festival, which is DocuFest. So
great.
I'm a great lover of nonfiction films, but I've only ever done shorts.
Yeah.
So
understandably.
yeah. So the one I'm working on now is a feature. So it's like, oh,
Wow.
gonna take up a lifetime. Hopefully, I'll have it by next year.
Good luck.
So, but this is great information for me because doing a short film, I've not had as much information or feedback as much as I've been talking to you about your film. So when I finish my feature film, of course I'll want to do some of that because it's actually beneficial before I screen it at film festivals.
Yeah,
definitely.
I'd be surprised at some things you hear that are helpful.
Yeah, so this has been very, very helpful, and I'm sure other people watching this will too. One of the things is that because this is only our third year doing the DocuFest, so we're trying to get as much information from the audience and filmmakers as possible to figure out where we go from here. Whether you want to see what you talked about your film going into environmental film festivals. Be honest with you, I didn't even know there were those type of film festivals.
Oh yeah, there's many. Yep, there are many of them.
And that's only because I've never done an environmental film. So it's like I'm aware they exist. I get to see them every once in a while for my film festival. Now that this is our third year, but I don't have like this big, huge background with environmental films unless it's a Disney nature documentary.
Yeah.
So,
Get that.
So it's very. Go ahead.
I just would like to add one other venue that we were invited to show our film, and it was the UN Climate Conference in Glasgow in not the one this year that was in Egypt, but the one that was in Scotland last year. Uh-oh. And we were invited by the person who's called King Charles now, but he was Prince Charles then. And we got invited by him, and Bonnie was able to go and meet him and present the film in Glasgow to climate experts worldwide. So that was pretty exciting too.
Yeah,
that's it's because climate change has become such a huge speaking point to so many different countries and so many different people that I mean, this will be extremely beneficial. And I'm actually glad to hear that you're getting it into schools. You're getting it into the groups that are trying to speak more about it and educate their countries and people about it more so, because I think this is the only way to get it out there is by showing these films, not just once, but twice, maybe 3 times to different groups of people to get the word out. So
it's true. It's tedious, but it pays off if you do the step by step.
Yeah.
So, one good final question I have to ask you is, when people are watching your film, what is one of the things that you want them to get out of your film, and or even if they have to, show other people your film, what is this one thing that you want them to get out of watching your film?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think one of the main messages we want people to get out, and we do try to say this at the end of every film, is that we have to preserve forests, stop deforestation, preserve old growth forests, because forests and wetlands and bogs and grasslands are huge stores of carbon. And when you deforest and develop wetlands into condos and things like that, you're releasing all this stored carbon into the atmosphere. And the best thing you can do is preserve all those natural carbon sinks. And it's not the same thing to plant a new tree when you cut down an old tree, because it takes a tree 40 years to start storing carbon. And you're losing all that time and getting the carbon from the tree you've cut down back into the atmosphere. And then it takes 40 more years for the new little sapling to start becoming a tree and storing carbon. So we have to stop the deforestation that's happening.
What about you, Melanie? Any final thoughts?
Well, yes, we want people to come away with a sense of urgency at the same time as a sense of hope that they can make a difference. And what you need to do is vote for people who believe in saving the planet by addressing the warming climate. And we hope people will get inspired to act.
Okay. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you both about your film. What I would like is that if you have the chance at some point, make sure to send me any links that are pertinent to your cause, to your film, and all that. I will make sure to post them. We are
chat. I put our link in the chat.
Excellent, because I am always up for promoting not only films and filmmakers, but causes that are representative of those projects. Plus, a lot of these projects are also something that I feel dearly about too. So, yeah, just by all means, keep us in the loop. We will post them. We will get the word out as much as possible.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it means a lot to us, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, ladies, for joining us for Something Wicked DocuFest. And hopefully you'll have a great rest of your evening.
You too.
Well, thanks. I have my wine now, so now I can drink.
Drink. Enjoy. Well, I hope your festival goes well.
Oh, yes. Oh,
anything? Do we get any passes, or we can buy tickets to it?
No. You got I will send out an email with all the password for every filmmaker that came. You guys don't.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So we can watch them virtually at home. We can watch the film.
You'll be able to watch all virtually at home.
Is it only a virtual festival?
This year it is. Our venue that we had shut down. So normally with these we usually do a best of the festival screening, and then the rest of them was online. This year we couldn't do it because the venue we have closed down for that whole month, or this whole month. They're under construction, so we're not doing it this year. But next year we hope to be back in full swing. No more COVID, no more people. It's been a rough couple years.
Oh yeah, sure.
As a film festival, and we were doing 3. It's been a rough couple years, so we're hoping next year we'll be back full force with all 3 of our film festivals in person and everything. So,
and they're all in Atlanta?
Yep, we do all 3 of them in Atlanta.
Well, keep up the great work.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome, ladies. All right, have a good evening.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.